filled you in a little bit. Like every Friday, it just sort of happened out of this COVID-19 thing
Yeah.
where like it would be really fun. We've got all these amazing little skaters that are just, beginning their adventure.
Yeah.
And it would be really fun just to bring in people that I love, respect, adore, admire, to kind of like share their adventure,
Yeah.
and just sort of like just openly have a like a conversation about, because everybody's journey is different, and really honestly, just looking at you, nobody's journey has been more different than yours. It's
So
really,
true. It's so true.
it's
Yeah.
like it's wild. I mean,
I
my
like
goodness.
ping ponged to get where I was gonna go. It was like playing pinball, and then I finally got where I was meant to end up.
I know, but I mean, it's like it's part of the journey, is just sort of like bounce, it's like I think no, yeah, it's good, but it's like I mean, army brat, right? You're
Yep,
like that's an affectionate term, army brat. I wasn't
it is.
calling you a brat, right?
Oh, no, no, no,
So
no. Proud of it.
yeah, army brat. My son wants to go into the army. He's really like myopic. All he wants to do is army, army, army. So
Okay.
we've been rolling up our sleeves and talking about what that looks like. But so you were born on an army base in Heidelberg, Germany.
Yes.
Do you remember any of that?
Literally nothing. So people are like, wow, Germany, what's that like? Like, I don't know. So I was born in Germany. We were there for 2 years. We moved somewhere else in Germany. And then after that, we moved back to the US. And I moved 9 times in 10 years.
Yeah,
So
that's the army life, right? It's like
yeah.
usually though you'd stay at a base at least 2 or 3 years, right, before they move you. But you're moving every year.
My dad was one of those special forces guys where, I'd get a phone call from him once every couple of weeks. He's in Bosnia, like something weird is going on in the background.
Wow.
We were always on the go.
Wow. That's kind of where my son's interests are, is special forces, and I've been setting him up with as many people as I can to talk him out of it. But, with each one there.
Hey, have him call me up. I can absolutely talk anyone out of joining the military.
Okay. All right. We can do that. Yeah. So it was, I talk to me about the family dynamic back then. Your dad was gone most of the time, and mom was looking after you and siblings.
Yeah, so I have a younger brother. My mom was such a huge part of my career. I'm not going to lie, she's a crazy skating mom, but also that got me really far in my career. She really pushed me. And so I think what my mom taught me, because she gave it her all, she was driving me to the rink. She was a school teacher. So she would take us to practice in the morning. My brother also skated. Then we'd go to school. She would teach. From school, we'd go back to wherever we had to go for training. And so my mentality growing up was, she's giving it so much time and energy. The least I can do to show her that I appreciate it is show up on the ice and make the most of the time I have. And I also think I learned to appreciate how expensive skating is and how much of a privilege it is, because I did not grow up in a wealthy family. I very much grew up in a working class family. And so skating was a huge strain on my family, and I was constantly aware of it. So I knew my time on the ice was precious, and I really had to milk it for all it was worth.
And, it's kind of like, looking at it, it's kind of like this kind of like storybook idyllic thing. I mean, you started skating in Alaska, right?
Yeah. Yep.
How good is that?
What else do you do in Alaska? You figure skate. I remember I started skating because my dad was gone and my mom was trapped in the house by herself with my brother and I. He was 3 and I was 5. And I think she was just like, I can't do this anymore. I need to get
wear them out. Yeah, I got to wear them out. Got to find a way to wear them out.
Exactly. And I remember she gave me the choice of ballet or figure skating. And back then, during recess in the winter, they froze over the parking lot at my school and you could skate. Like, I think now there are so many lawsuits potentially like that would literally never happen. But I just remember being like, oh, I could skate at recess. That's kind of cool. And that's literally how it started.
Oh my goodness. And, you know, it's like, you'd think, you know, you're just up the street from Anchorage, right? Were you living in Anchorage, or were you living at an Army base outside of Anchorage?
Outside, about an hour, I believe. It was called Eagle River. And when I was living there, it was literally like a street, a couple of houses, an Army base in the distance, and like moose. That was
Moose.
basically it.
Stay away from moose, because
Yeah.
they're crazy. They're
are.
aggressive, and they're not very smart, right?
No, bad
Yeah.
combo.
And then bears. You got to watch out for bears
Yeah.
too. Certain times of the year, it's like no bueno on the bears
Grizzly
thing,
season
right?
was a really rough time here for me, yes.
But best salmon in the world.
There you go. At 5, I didn't appreciate it.
No, you can't wait to go back, right? So, but I mean, it's like, you know, we were there. Oh, it's so funny, on tour. It was one year, I was like, I was a dagger to my heart. I was like, kind of like not invited to the World Pros in Landover.
Okay.
And it's like, I mean, I love that event. It was just sort of like every year I just looked towards it. And so I didn't get invited. Just missed the cut. They wanted fresh blood. They wanted new faces. And I was just devastated. And so Eddie Shipstad set up an Alaskan tour. Okay. So it's like, all right, we can do this. Yeah. You know, so I helped him produce the show. We got skaters, and we started, I'm trying to think of where we started. We started in like Soldotna. No, it wasn't Soldotna.
That was where my first skating competition was. If that's the case.
We did Soldotna, we did Anchorage, and we did Fairbanks, where we couldn't land because there was an ice fog. Yeah. Right. And so we get off the plane finally. An ice fog, for all you skaters that don't know, is when it's so cold outside, the air literally freezes. And it's like, it's not like fog, like we're used to fog. It's like frozen air. Yes. So it's like for planes, they can't see anything, they can't do anything. And so we landed finally, and then they put me in for press to promote the show because they still had a lot of tickets to sell. Mm-hmm. They put me on a dog sled in a wolf coat to keep me warm. All I could do is see out this little thing. They had this hat on, and it was like the plane was delayed, so it was starting to get dark, right? So the guy was using a flashlight to move the dog sled, and he lost focus for a second, and he went like that, and the dog just turned right in the dark, right? And the whole thing just sort of tipped over. And so I'm sitting there in a dog sled, can't move, in this wolf coat, looking down at the road, which is like right here. Yeah. And then we ended up in Anchorage, and we were watching a football game, and Charlie Tickner and Mark Cockrell got into a discussion, right, in the lounge with a couple hockey players. Oh, okay. And so it ended up becoming a dare: who can skate faster, figure skaters or hockey players. And so they put down each $100 bill on a snowbank at the finish line, right? Whoever won got to take both $100 bills, right? So Charlie Tickner goes out and he just starts skating against this hockey player. Of course, he's drunk, he wipes out, and then Charlie's like skating backwards, in and all that stuff. And then he went back to grab the $200, and the guy's girlfriend had taken off with the money.
There you go.
So to this day, Charlie Tickner is the reigning Lake Spinard speed skating champion. But I mean, Alaska, that's kind of like, it's like the beginning of Blades of Glory or something, where you have the kids skating outside, and it's like they're 5 years old and they're showing all this promise. But then you went, did you go to Kansas City next? Where it was next?
So, yes. I moved so many times, I have to backtrack. So from Alaska, we went out to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
Nice. Prison, there's a prison there. Yeah.
Correct. What we were doing there, I can't tell you. I just remember tornadoes and buffalo. Like, I really
tornadoes. You're not in Alaska anymore, right?
no. I just remember being like, this is different. And that's probably where I really started to appreciate how much work my mom was putting in, because we had to drive an hour each way to get to a rink with a coach.
Yeah.
So, and that was in Kansas City. So I just remember being asleep, and Austin, my brother, and we had bunk beds, and my mom would come in at like 4 a.m. We'd be asleep, get us dressed. She'd carry us to the car. She'd drive to the rink. I'd go skate. She'd drive back. We'd go to school. I mean, that level of dedication really showed me how much my parents just understood what skating was to me.
Yeah.
And when you're moving around as much as I did, it's hard to believe, the bubbly human being that I am now, but I was painfully shy as a kid. I was always in a new environment and just terrified of like new social situations. I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't feel comfortable. And the rink was really that one place that was familiar. You go into a rink is a rink. Skaters are skaters. You already have something in common with them. And that was really helpful for me moving around, to at least go in and be like, okay, you're working on your axle, so am I. Like, it was really a tie that bonded me with kids my age.
Well, I mean, it's a community, right? I mean, it just turns into this thing where you go, a rink's a rink, and a lot of people don't appreciate, especially for our young skaters, because so many of them are just sort of beginning their journeys, they're kind of is how small the skating community really is.
Freakishly small, in a good way.
In a great way. I mean, it's like, I'll talk to somebody, like I'll be in a golf tournament or something, and somebody go, have you ever met Katarina Bitt? It's like, I've known her since she was 12 years old.
Right.
It's like, really? That must be weird. It's like, why would that be weird? It's like, well, she's kind of like really good looking. And I go, well, I always saw her as like this little girl. So don't, you're barking up the wrong tree. But then it's like, have you ever met like Dick Button? It's like, well, yeah. It gets into this thing of everybody kind of knows everybody, and they also at times may know a little bit too much about somebody. So you gotta kind of pick your spots and just sort of like get into the community of figure skating and get into the shared experience of figure skating and goal setting and falling down and getting up and all those great lessons we learn. But, for you, it's like, there's so much to, like when you talk about, why aren't the Washington Redskins any good? Well, there's no continuity, right? And so you, because of your moving around, like constantly, I mean, continuity was a big problem. You went from Kansas City, then you went to Washington, right? Area.
Yep.
And that's where you met Shirley Hughes there. Am I right?
So I went from Kansas City to Tacoma, Washington. And Tacoma is a little bit outside of Seattle for anyone who doesn't know.
Rome up Tacoma. I remember that.
Yep. Yeah. And then from Tacoma, I went to Vancouver, Washington. And Vancouver is basically right outside of Portland, Oregon. Yeah, so I worked with 2 different coaches there. Yeah. I worked with Dodie Teachman, who...
Love Dodie.
I love Dodie. Love Dodie. Yeah. She worked with Tanya. And then from there, I went out to Virginia, and that's where I ended up with Shirley Hughes. And then I moved somewhere else in Virginia, but I stayed working with Shirley. And then that was where I started to actually get some continuity. I worked with her for about 6 or 7 years. That was the longest I had ever worked with a coach. When I came to her, I was working on my double axel. My double axel took me 4 years to get, and I think it was because I was just this
Too
like,
many voices in your head, right? You know,
yeah,
it's
I was like this caravan child who was just going
yeah.
from coach to coach.
And
Um,
that's hard, right?
yeah,
That's really hard because you have these different and that's what I love about, kind of the CERs and, coaching, sharing techniques and all that, because people can start almost singing off the same sheet of music. You know what
yeah,
I mean? So instead of it just being, well, I learned like throw yourself up and just like pull in as hard as you can. And it's
right.
like, well, no, it's like get up and in or up and in, or it's like that, right?
Yeah.
So here's a crazy question that just came to me with all this stuff, this like map where you could just do the dots, like, the old Indiana Jones things
Yeah.
that you have all over the world. So what skating club did you represent? It's
All
like,
of
what?
them. Literally
All of
all of
them.
them.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so for a very long time, I was Anchorage Figure Skating Club.
Very cool. Yeah.
Felt appropriate. And then I moved to the Portland Figure Skating Club.
Okay.
And then when I moved out east, I was absolutely one of these girls, I'm going to admit it. But I stayed Portland Figure Skating Club because Pacific Northwest Regionals is a bit easier, and I wanted to be able to get to Nationals.
It's part of skating is strategy. It
Uh,
really is.
as a
A big
girl,
part.
I was a novice lady without a double axel. I absolutely was going to set myself up to get as far as I could.
Yeah.
But I started, let's see, I remember regionals. I was literally on the ice at regionals. I got my double axel and triple sow on the 5-minute warm up. I was like, okay, this is cool. Let's see where this goes.
Nobody does that, by the way. No,
No.
to you. Nobody does that. Like get your
But I did
double
my
axle
time.
and triple sow on a warm up for competition. It's
Yes,
like
but then
that's 6
it
minutes.
got crazy. I remember I went back to the boards, and Shirley Hughes was with me at that event, I believe, and she was just like,
What just happened?
okay, like she didn't want to say anything because I don't think she wanted to get into my head. But then after that, I lost all of my doubles. So then I was like, okay, I guess I just have to go triple from here on out.
Yeah. I mean, there's no dry land anymore. Just set sail and just keep going where we're headed, right? See, I did the other thing. I got my triple sow about a week or two before nationals, junior year.
Yeah.
And I went to go out for my long program, and I was taking from Evie Scottfold at the time, and he goes, "Don't warm up your triple sow." And I was like, "Why?" And he goes, "We really don't want to know if it's there or not." Right? So it's like I went out and just big doubles, double, got the feeling of doubles. And then, I was such an epic disaster all the time at nationals, like ninth, 7th, I was always, and if you're a boy, no bueno, right?
No.
So I went out in my long program, and I just said, it's my last competition ever because my parents were out of money, and I threw this triple sow. And normally my view would be like of the ceiling,
Yeah.
and I'm looking at people, and I'm like on one foot backwards going, ah! And then I got so excited I forgot to mess up the rest of my program.
I know.
And I won junior nationals. But it's like those things can happen, right? You just got to be like open to the possibility.
Well, you also realize so much of it is in your head.
Yeah.
Truly. I think that it took me 4 years because I was working on technique, but then it became like a bigger deal in my head, and mentally I held myself back because I was just overthinking things and forcing it too hard. And then I was nervous and thinking about every other thing. And then all of a sudden I get my double axel on the warm up because I'm capable, but I'm not actually thinking about the millions of things that are usually running through my head. So,
it's kind of like that saying, the lights are on and nobody's home, right? But that for you, it was the lights are on and everybody's home. It's
everyone's
like
in my head.
chaos. They're all screaming at each other. It's
yes.
Like, okay, that's insane.
Yeah.
So then what happens? Okay, so we're going in the chronology of like your crazy life. So you stayed in the Pacific Northwest because that was like an easier section.
Yes, but here's the thing. That only gets you out of regionals because then
Pacific Coast.
I
Yeah,
didn't.
and that's tougher,
I was
right?
like,
Because
I just want to get out
LA,
of
San
regionals.
Francisco, yeah, that
And
gets
then all of a sudden you're competing against all the California girls.
yeah,
So
yeah.
first sectionals, did I make it to nationals? Nope.
Who were the girls back then? Just do we remember any of them? Do we know who they were? Were they? Did they?
I've competed against Caroline Jang
Yeah,
for
forever. Yeah.
Mariah hadn't. I'm a little bit older than Mariah, so Mariah hadn't shown up yet. But I mean, there are some classics that I was competing against, and so I'm pretty sure my first sectionals I came in dead last. I also went in and was like, so hot to trot. First place at regionals. I'm going to absolutely skate on through this. And then the California girls were like, oh, no, we have like through triplets.
Yeah.
Your triple style is pretty cute. So
it's like,
good. That's nice.
That's so cute. Bless your heart.
Yes. Oh my God. A proper Southern girl. Bless your heart.
Bless your heart with your little triple sow. God, that is so adorable.
I know that bless your heart is the meanest thing you can say to someone. I'm well aware of that.
Just about, yeah. It's a nice way of insulting somebody. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I had to learn that down here, you know.
But so I did not make it out of sectionals. And then that was super humbling because for me, I'm like, I work really hard. My parents are telling me that this is getting to be too expensive for me to be mediocre. And I hate losing. So what am I going to do about it? And I went home, worked my butt off, got the rest of my triple jumps in about 6 months.
Wow.
And went back the next year, made it all the way through to nationals. Showed up. I was competing through Lutz. Could I do a backwards crossover to save my life? No. I just put the effort into triples. And so I could do the triples, but then I totally got eaten alive by the girls who were doing triples and skating. I remember that was like Rachel Flatt, Juliana Canaroso, those girls who just were elegant and doing triples. So I think for me, the reason why I feel like looking at my career is important for skaters is because I wasn't good. I was not good.
Neither was I. I was like, no bueno. Yeah.
Like I was not the most talented. I had an ounce of talent and I maximized on that. And that's what got me as far as I went in the sport because I learned how to work through my weaknesses. And, you know, a lot of people spend so much time celebrating what they're really good at. And I would take a moment to be like, hey, nice triplets. Okay, wow, all of this is bad. And I would focus on that. And I really decided after that nationals, because I was so pumped to be there, but also I didn't want to be the girl who went to nationals and was middle of the pack.
Yeah.
I looked at what the girls that were beating me were doing, and I absolutely picked that apart. But I still kept that like reckless confidence where I was just like, I'm better than them. In that moment, was I? No, but I was just I could be.
That's my story and I'm sticking to it, right? You know, it's like that. So, you know, the one thing that, and it reminds me, because throughout these Friday talks, you know, the one thing that kind of comes up is humble and hungry. You know, that those two words keep going together. It was like, I really wanted to get better. I really wanted to win, but I kind of had to own my junk, right? I had to kind of own the fact that, no, maybe I wasn't doing that as well as I could, or maybe I didn't really want to do that, even though it's really important. I didn't feel comfortable doing it, so I just didn't want to do it, or I didn't feel like, well, I'm super shy, or I don't want to get into the performance aspect of the sport. It's kind of like not me. So I'm going to just do all my little stuff here and do the jumps. And so it's really important for our little skaters, you know, who are sort of forming their swing thoughts, forming their worldview of skating, to look at skaters like you who really had to, you know, kind of get humbled a
Mm,
lot,
mm,
and you know, kind of have to work it out and
yeah,
just say, no, it just wasn't. This is, you know, like Ashley Wagner is skating royalty, but I wasn't anointed. I had to fight for it. I had to
God,
like dig deep for it. I
yeah,
had to lose a lot in order to figure out where I needed to get better. I had to look at the other skaters to figure out what they were doing that I wasn't.
yep,
And it's really interesting because I remember way back, I'm not going to name names because, you know, not, you know, it's, you know, that nobody would tell anyway, but I was at junior nationals my first year, and we're going out for short program warm up, and we're all just sort of laughing and go, well, you know, so-and-so's going to win anyway. You know, it's like, whatever. He's
yeah,
already got his name on the trophy. And this other kid looked at me and he goes, we'll see about that. And I was like, what was that? I go,
yeah,
well, you mean the door's open?
right,
I always assume that when somebody knew they're going to win nationals, they just won nationals. And he went out and he won. Like
yeah,
the guy that said, we'll see, went out and he just beat the other guy. The other guy's going, what just happened? It was
right.
like,
Well,
and they're in the
it's a
back kind of
trophy.
scraping his name off the trophy and re-etching the other guy's name in. So it's like everything is possible.
Yeah,
Nothing is out of your reach
mhm,
if you just put the time in, really work with your coaches and listen to what they're trying to like get in there organically.
yeah,
But I mean, and this goes back to what we covered a little bit, you know, and you've had a lot of voices in your head. I mean,
yeah,
you had one person saying this, then you go to there, and then you go to, like, you move to a new town, and then you got Shirley, and you have Shirley for a long time, but then you switch over to Priscilla.
mm-hmm.
What went into that switch? What precipitated that?
So I think it's a weird part in my career, not Priscilla, but like how I came to this point, because it was right on the cusp of me becoming kind of autonomous in my career. I very much was the athlete who skated originally because it was something my parents wanted me to do. And then I kept on doing it because why not? And then I
Yeah.
got good at it and I was like, oh, let's see how far this goes. This is kind of cool. And then I think with my switch, I had reached a point where it was time for me to move into a bigger space. I was the best one at my rink,
That's
and
hard.
it,
Yeah.
it is tough, and I think it can be done. And I wouldn't say that every choice I made in my career was perfect or the way I went about it was the way to do it. But for me in that moment, I very much needed some outside motivation, and I just felt a little bit stuck. And that had nothing to do with Shirley. That was just more, I was like, you know, I had to have been 16 or 17, a brat, had a bad attitude, and was just like, I need more than this. Like, I can
Yeah.
admit that. Um, and
It's like, I have a 16-year-old daughter. I get that.
yeah,
It just
and
sort
that's
of,
just like where I was.
happens. They wake up one day and they're kind of like,
Yeah, and that was
yeah,
me.
yeah,
That was absolutely me. And I think that it was a good move because it got the ball rolling and I ended up where I was supposed to go. But working with Priscilla, I mean, she had worked with Johnny Weir before. And I think for me, working with someone where I had like seen an example of success at a very high level, I just mentally needed that to feel like I was stepping it up. I don't know. So working with Priscilla really kind of started to make me see the elite realm that I could be literally skating into as a possibility.
yeah, yeah,
And I think it was a really important chapter. I don't know if it was the right fit because for me, I was in a weird space in my career. I was trying to kind of take over skating for myself because my parents and my mom had been, like I said, remember, crazy skating mom, proud owner. Like she did not want to let go of skating. And for me, it was really important that I take on skating totally by myself because it was just so much pressure from my parents. And like every day I was being reminded of how expensive it was. And I just wanted to do it for myself. and see how far that got me. And so I moved to Priscilla, and then when I turned 18, pretty much almost to the day I turned 18, I moved out of my house. And so Priscilla was a huge part of that transition where I was, you know, skating. My family was not in the picture. I was living on my own. I was literally living off of like ramen noodles and just trying to make it work. So I was just a big old bundle of stress and hormones and oh my god.
Yeah. Oh man,
Bless
that's
her heart in like a very kind way, because
yeah.
she had to put up with me at my absolute worst, and she really molded me or created a really good base for Mr. Nix.
Well, and she, you know, honestly, I knew Priscilla back then. I skated with her.
Yeah.
You know, she also had one of those moms that was
Yes.
really like it was almost like, you know, Priscilla would go out and do something great, and the mom would say, "Excuse me, it's time for my bow." And you know, it sounds harsh, but it was kind of like, you know, whose is this? You know, so you
Right.
have to take ownership at some point. And I think Priscilla was uniquely qualified to kind of walk you through that, you know,
She
as almost
empathized.
like a, yeah, like a decompression chamber almost of
Yes.
like, you've been there, this was your life, this is my life, you know, we can kind of see eye to eye on this. You get me probably better than
More
anybody
so
else
than
at
anyone.
this point.
Yes.
And then, you know, but still the results they were getting better. I mean, you were
Yes.
still climbing the ladder consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm trying to think of, so then you went to Mr. Nix, who I'm like the biggest John Nix fan like on the planet Earth. He is just the most charming gentleman ever.
I
And
adore that man.
oh my good. And you guys had a really funny relationship, right?
Oh, absolutely. The things he would say to me, first of all, he could only get away with saying these things because he's like a 80, or I think he just turned 90. But like,
Yeah, I think he's like 200 years old. Yeah, it's like, yeah.
I mean, he just reminds me of like the man from Up and Yoda. If they like had a baby, it would be Mr. Nix.
Yeah, yeah.
But working
Love
with
that
him
man.
was genuinely such a treat, because the way that I had approached skating before had just been, all right, go out, land your jumps. If you stand up, you see results. And Mr. Nix really made me kind of take a step back and understand that there are more people in the arena than just that panel of judges.
Yeah.
And that completely changed my career. He is the man who turned me into the performer that I am today, because he verbatim told me, I don't care what you're doing on this level. You need to make sure that the person at the top of the rink in the cheap seats, back up there, that can barely see you, you look like an ant, they need to feel like they're getting the same performance as the person in the front row.
I mean, I tell our skaters all the time, if you're not selling it, nobody can buy it. You know, so
Yeah.
it's kind of that, but it's also, you know, it's that circle, like, you know, that circle that we draw. And it's like, if you look in the middle of that circle, all these people think that you're looking at them, and thus you're included in the performance. It's like you're inviting people to the party. If you're down here all the time, then everybody's going to be like checking their watch, pulling their phone out. You know, it's like, you're not, you know, I'm not a part of this. So you can do your thing, you know, but if you're actually performing and looking at people and including them, and really it starts here.
Yeah.
And it ends about here. Like all of this just emits light and joy and inclusion and performance and love, right? So that is so cool, because you were always, and I'll just say it, like, you know, the first word that comes to my mind, you were phenomenally flirtatious on the ice.
Yes.
Like, I didn't see anybody do it like that since probably Katarina Witt. She was like,
stop it, she's my idol, I'm honored.
Yeah, she was the most flirtatious person. She goes, you know, like, I can't even say it in this chat because I knew her for so long, but she got to a point where it's like, I know. Yeah, I know. I know what you're thinking right now, and it's like, stop. You know, so. But you were extremely flirtatious, and you used all of that to kind of really set almost cast a spell on an audience, which was really cool. And
Yeah.
so Mr. Nix gave you that.
He did. I mean, he made the point that if you bring an entire arena to their feet,
Yeah.
how can the judges deny that you performed well?
Yeah.
It literally translates into that second mark, into that grade of execution. It has value. It has a number. And I think in the way I commentate now and watching how a lot of these skaters go about their programs, they discredit how valuable that is. And it becomes so perfunctory and technical. And Mr. Nix, because this was right around, I mean, the system wasn't new, but it was still very much being developed and understood. And he was just like, he's old school, but just because it's old doesn't mean it isn't valuable. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work. He really made me think about every moment in the program. And he would bring up Sasha Cohen and he would tell me, you could take a picture of Sasha Cohen at any moment in her performance and she's going to look
perfect.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Did I hit
John
that?
Curry was the same
No,
way.
but I tried to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's only one Sasha Cohen, right? It's like, there's only one this, there's only one you, there's only, I mean, everybody's got to kind of leverage their strengths and their sort of like their ingrained abilities. Like in my little commencement speech I gave right before we got on this, you know, I just said, you know, there's 100 billion people born to the planet. And on a cellular level, like you're so unique. Like, there's only been one of you in the history of the world.
Right.
So to try to like fit into somebody else's skates or somebody else's skating or somebody else's dress or whatever, it's not going to fit because what you have is uniquely yours and is really kind of like, it's got its own strength, its own power, its own identity. And you kind of live on that. Like I was always really hurt, like offended that, you know, I would watch all these kids like doing all this stuff like Brian Orser, you know, and I was like, well, I'm beating him right now. Why aren't you imitating me? It's like nobody imitated me. And then I look back on that now and it's like, oh, because like it would be hard because I'm the only me, right? You know, and I was inspired or influenced by other skaters. Like I know a lot of skaters were influenced and inspired by you, but they're not going to be you.
Right.
Wasted exercise, right?
Yeah.
So you're growing in the skating, you're growing, and Mr. Nix is really bringing this next thing in. And then all of a sudden, like he decides, all right, like I could break a hip or something, right? I'm not going to get on an airplane to go anywhere. I've earned that because like,
fair.
I knew Benjamin Franklin, like I had, you know,
Yeah.
So then like the Mad Russian comes into play, right?
Yes.
You know, so Raph comes in. How was that relationship between Raph and Mr. Nix? How did they coach you?
So my journey into that whole relationship, I will never forget this. I was touring with Stars on Ice, but it was also Mr. Nix. Right. I will always say he deserved to be like, I don't want to get on a plane to go to Russia. That's really far. But he did bring this up like the summer of Olympic season. So I was back in town because NBC has their pre-Olympic photo shoot for all of their promotional stuff. And so Mr. Nix calls me up and he's like, hello, Dia, would you like to get some tea with me? I'm like, sure, I'll check in with you. Why not? And I'll never forget this. He like pats the chair. He says, sit down. I'm like, hi, how are you? And he's just like, I can't coach you this season. I'm like,
wow. Bam.
Yeah. And I mean, the points he made were really fair. He was really tired and he wanted to stay on, but he actually recommended that I go to Frank Carroll. So of course I'm like, oh, okay, now I have to like have another really nervous phone call. Cause the first time I called Mr. Nix, he had no idea who I was. He was just like, oh, okay, you can like come have a tryout, I guess. And then he comes out and he's like, oh, okay, got it. But I called up Frank and asked if he had time for me. And he said he didn't want to take on, you know, he had promised Evan he would see him through some things. He was busy. And so for me, I was like, okay, no problem. So then I call up Adam Rapon, who has been my like right-hand man my entire career. I'm in tears. I'm like, I don't have a coach.
Yeah.
And he is just like, I know, because I'd always been really intimidated by working with a Russian, just because I know that their technique is very specific. And I was terrified of Raf.
Yeah.
And he's like, I know you're scared of working with a Russian, but I really think you will like Raf. Just come for a tryout. And so I went up to Lake Arrowhead where he was training, had a tryout. He had me on the ice for like 6 hours that day. I had never skated that many consecutive hours in my life. And he brought this level of intensity where I was just kind of like, okay, this is cool. This feels like if I do this, I could really improve. And so he agreed to take me on. And I think we both didn't quite realize how much of a challenge that was going to be for one another, because I am very stubborn. I pride myself on being coachable, but like you can't walk all over me. And sometimes I have to like reel myself in and remind myself, okay, they're trying to do this for my career and to make me better. So I have to keep myself in check. I can admit that. So I think Raf and I, when we first started working together, it took a lot for me to understand when he's like, go do a triple loop. What he's really saying is, hey, I'd like you to go do a triple loop.
Yeah. It's all in the tone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like Don Laws would always tell me, don't do what I say, hear what I mean.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. You have to really think about that. And you're like,
all right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, okay. That seems, but we got to a point where my leash was that long. And then each year he'd give me a little bit more leash. Yes. Right. Because, and that's kind of what you and Raf went through, right? He had you really tight and he was like trying to, get you into this little lane right here. Once you get into this lane, he knows you're going to be fine. He's such a strange guy.
So weird.
And I don't mean that as an insult or anything else, but he is so like different than anyone else I've ever met. And he's kind of like the best kind of crazy, because he's so
brilliant.
Yeah. He's so, wow. What's eccentric in so many ways.
He's kind of like a mad scientist.
Yeah. And he's very honest. He told me one time, he goes, I work so hard. I just work so hard. And I would, and my skaters got worse. And it was like, what's wrong with me? It's like, what's wrong with me? And he goes, I had to learn how to coach.
Yeah.
And so he was very humble in his approach. And of all the Russian coaches I've ever seen in the US, I think he's the one that really takes coaching Americans seriously. A lot of them go, well, how I learned to be skating in Russia, I can't do that here because I get arrested, right?
Yes.
But he kind of has figured this thing out in a way. And it was really an interesting relationship because he challenged you. I mean, he's a very strong personality. Obviously, all that independence that you espouse as you present, he had to kind of like, whittle away at this and kind of like chop that off and kind of
completely molded me into a new athlete. He kind of approaches American figure skating like we automatically have something wrong with us to begin with.
Well,
he's like,
okay,
you're American, so we're already starting from down here, but like we'll get past this.
We'll figure it. Yeah, we're through it.
I thought I worked hard with Mr. Nix. I thought I worked hard throughout my entire career. I did not understand hard work until I got to Raphael. And he and I think we kind of taught each other a bunch because he also started working with me when I was a lot older for a female figure skater. I mean, I was 22, and that's not old in any way, shape, or form, but like
But you're set by then, right? You're kind of set. You are who you are.
Yeah, exactly. And he wanted to like take me back to factory settings and build from there. And
factory settings.
Quite a challenge. And I remember I first started skating with him, and he wanted to just see what my jumps looked like. And so I would come back and I would tell him what I thought was wrong. And he would cut me off and be like, I don't care what you think. It doesn't matter what you think went wrong. You did it wrong, so you don't know how to fix it. And is that harsh? Yes. Do I think like young kids are his best audience? No. But as an adult, that really, I mean, but it was right. I made the mistake. So clearly going into it, I wasn't thinking about the right things to adjust the jump to make it a good jump. So he taught me to appreciate his expertise. And that's very much a respect thing with him. He wants to go in and know that you understand that he's the expert and you're trying to absorb that information. So as soon as I kind of understood that that's what he needed from me, I adjusted how I approached our coaching relationship, and I started to move ahead a lot faster.
And you know, and it's a really fascinating process, you know, because, and I don't want you to be like offended in any way, but you know, I always saw you as kind of like, you were a skater that was like grabbing everything as hard as you possibly could, you know, and you were going to make it happen no matter what. And he allowed you to kind of open your hand a little bit and accept things.
Yes.
And to kind of like loosen up. But you know, he was but he allowed you to kind of like, I can let it happen instead of make it happen.
Yes.
And like everything changed. I remember whenever I'm doing commentary, I always leave the skaters alone. I don't want your phone number so I can text you in the middle of the night or anything like that. I just really want to just sit back, and whatever you want to offer is great or whatever. But I really try to pay attention to body language and everything else. And I could see like how much you wanted it and how much it meant to you and how much you were just going to like, I'm not going to be denied this. And in that, you know, it's almost like that from your mid calf down, you almost lose touch with the ice sometimes, right? Yep. Right. So what Raph did for you is he allowed you through a lot of repetition he built your trust in you. He built your trust in you so that when you went out on the ice, it was like, you weren't wondering, you weren't thinking, I have to force this and make it happen. Yeah. Like, I'm ready. I'm okay. And I'm going to accept what happens next. And like, you know, and it's really cool. I mean, results are kind of like our bullet point list of I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, and this is who I am in the sport. But to me, like, you're different in so many ways because you represent so many different things. And it all kind of, I mean, it all, like, you're an Olympic medalist, you know, you did that, which was amazing in Sochi, and it was really a wild time there. History may not be kind to that Olympics. Right now, I think they're doing okay, but when things come up, but it's like, you know, you went there with, you know, this incredible enthusiasm, and you represented the country really well, and you interviewed great, and all those things are really important. But it was kind of the culmination of everything was in Boston.
Yes.
And it was right after Boston as well, because I saw you after that in Spokane for the team competition. And it was like, with Raph and allowing him to build a better for you to build a better relationship with yourself. Yeah. Things changed.
Completely.
Like, you had triple loop early.
Yes.
Right? Who does that? Like, crazy people do that, right? But it's like, you got to a point where when you stepped on the ice, like before, I'd kind of do this a little bit. And I go, I hope this works out for Ashley. I know how much she wants it. I just, you know, I hope that and then it became kind of like, oh, this is going to be fun. you know, it's like, I had no fear for you because I could just see it, right? Yeah. In Torino, we were, you know, next to the wall and right up there, great commentary position. And we could see everything. I mean, we could see the whites of their eyes, right? And so we see Sasha go out for the short program, and she's got her chin out, and she's just like warrior mode. Yeah. And she went out for the long program, and Frank is like, you know, doing all this, and it's like, uh-oh. And both Sandra and I said at the same time, it was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Because her eyes completely changed and it was
Yep.
a whole different intention going in. But with you, when you take the ice, there, you know, in that beautiful window that you created for yourself, there was such comfort and confidence, and it was remarkable. How did you get to that space?
Well, it was really important to him that I didn't need him. And he always said that to me. And coming from very traditional American coaching, I didn't understand that at first. He was like, you should not need me. You're old enough. You are developed enough in your career. You should not need me. And
That's great. That's
was,
awesome.
well, to like separate student and coach, I always thought it was student and coach. Like that's the relationship. And he wanted me to be an independent athlete who respected him and went to him for adjustments. But I didn't need to go to him for training needs. I didn't need to go. He didn't want to hold my hand.
Yeah. Don't tell me what to eat. Don't tell me when to go to bed. Don't tell me.
Yeah. He's like, you're an adult. I'm not your dad. You can figure this out.
Yeah.
And at first, I did not like that at all. But what he did really well was before he just completely let go, he worked me so hard. He taught me how to train. And so I have always been a firm believer in believing in your training. That's where my confidence comes from. And I've worked hard before, but this was a different level. This was like my soul was tired at the end of the day.
That's very Russian, by the way.
Yes.
My soul is so tired, is my soul. It's like my being is so tired.
Yes, like every ounce of my being was left on the ice during those training days. But then all of a sudden I was showing up to competitions and I was just kind of like, oh, I've got this. Because I have always, throughout my entire career, felt like the redheaded stepchild. Always. And I think that's why I like held on to things so tightly, because whether it was just from experience or whatever, I always felt like I had to make it happen. I never felt like I was the darling of US figure skating. I was always like the girl that was second or third to like the latest and greatest. And then I had my moment, but then Gracie came onto the scene, and then Gracie has the most perfect name in figure skating. She's so talented. And so like going into these seasons, I just always felt like second fiddle to Gracie. And she was a great tool for me because she pushed me and she gave me something to chase. But Raph was the one who I would get to competitions and he would be like, you know, none of this matters, right? I'm like, wait, no, don't tell me that. Like, I've trained so hard for this. And he's like, no, you've proven time and time and time again that you're good. You are good. Now let yourself go be good.
Yeah.
And that just gave me the ability to let go. And I remember Worlds after that. I mean, if we're being frank, that Worlds was set up for Gracie to win. Mm-hmm. It absolutely was set up for Gracie to win. And when she was good, I don't think I could beat a perfect Gracie Gold. I don't think that would be in the cards for me. But I knew that I had that confidence. I was the one who could put out 2 clean programs. I had consistency and I knew what I was going to deliver. So I show up to that Worlds. She's in first place after an amazing short program. And I just remember sitting back and saying to myself, because everyone at that point, they're like, it's Gracie's Worlds, it's Gracie's Worlds, it's Gracie's Worlds. And it absolutely could have been. And I just took a seat back and I said, tomorrow's my day. And we'll see what happens. And Raph doesn't even say anything to me. I'm the last skater at Worlds. I hear the audience getting louder and louder and louder after every single performance. And then I know that I'm right after Gracie. I hear just this like, whoa. And in that moment, I knew that the door was open. And sometimes that can be the worst thing because
now it's like it changes your mindset and then you're like
right. And Raph just looks at me and he's like, no, you're trained, you're ready, now go. Now I have chills because he just like he took that space to just say, you can do this. And he had trained me to believe that. And I went onto the ice, turned off my mind, because that has always been my worst enemy. Sometimes
a mind is a terrible thing, isn't it? That
like,
old commercial.
a stupid athlete, because they're easier to train.
Click, let your body do its job. It's trained.
Exactly
it knows
what
what it's
I did.
And you worked too hard at that point. Your body was ready. You just needed to like let go.
Yes. And he changed my career because he let me do that. And I mean, I'm so grateful for my time with all of my coaches, but he's the coach who gave me an extra 4 years of life, because he molded me into the athlete I always wanted to be.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, that's the adventure, right? Yeah. You can look back and you can say, I did everything and more than I expected to do.
Yep.
And it all came down to me working well with others and me taking in information and really allowing myself to be formed into a complete skater who can stand up to any situation. I mean, that's a skater's dream. Yeah. Like an absolute dream. Well, thank you. I mean, you've given us so much to chew on, and I know Corey's right there. Where are you, Corey?
Got to unmute. I'm en route on my way back to Tennessee. This is my return. So I'm back in Colorado Springs to pick up my girls, and we'll be driving tomorrow. Ashley, I just want to say thank you for giving us your time, and obviously your insight and wisdom. Thank you for sharing with our skaters. I know we have a bunch of people that are going to watch this after the fact, so we'll answer questions and see if we can get their comments back to you sometime this week. But thank you so much, really, for being here. And thank you, of course, Scott, for this weekly awesome.
It's fun.
It's great.
Isn't it fun? It's great because we get to kind of hear how the house was built.
Yes.
And everybody's got their own story, and yours is remarkable. So thank you for being with us this week. We really appreciate it.
Of course, you guys. Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see you in Nashville in November if we can have the show.
All the fingers crossed.
Yeah. I pulled a groin when I pulled all my fingers and toes in costume. I'm just like, okay, I'm out. All right. Well, God bless you. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much for being with us.
Of course.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.